everyone. Welcome to the EdTech Startup Show. I'm your host, Gerard Dawson, and today I'm happy to have as my guest Jennifer Larson, who is the co-founder, CEO of Hive Digital Minds, as well as the creator of SchoolBzz. Jennifer, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I mentioned a few names there and your role. So if people ask you what you're up to, what you're working on, what do you tell them?
Yeah, so two brands there really. So Hive Digital Minds is our company, and we've been working with school leaders in the K-12 industry for about 15 years now, really focused on school communications, parent engagement strategies. And basically it was through that process that we saw a need to really help schools do a better job at communicating and sharing information with parents. And so that led to the creation of SchoolBzz, and that's our flagship product now. It's a SaaS platform, cloud-based platform. And basically what SchoolBzz is that's our parent app that allows schools to easily share information with parents, and it's an app for parents that allows them to really customize and personalize their experience as far as the type of information they want to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an important aspect of education, of course, parent communication and keeping all the stakeholders informed, which I want to get back to. But like we were just joking around about before we went on the call, I recently saw something that just caught my attention was I knew you were if I have it right, a Colorado-based entrepreneur, and I saw a picture of you and John Elway.
Yeah. Yeah, that was down at Denver Startup Week this year. So Colorado has this amazing entrepreneurial community, and they host a free event every September, and it's called Denver Startup Week. And it's just entrepreneurs from all kinds of industries, and they all come together and they pull together thought leaders and local business folks to just talk about starting companies, experiences they've had and whatnot. And John Elway, as we all know him as kind of the football legend, but he started a lot of businesses here in Colorado. And so he was actually running a session that talked a lot about his background and what type of businesses he was running and why he chose those and whatnot. And so, yeah, there was a meet and greet opportunity at the end. And I thought, well, why not? And of course, if you look closely at that photo, you'll see I even gave him one of our standard kind of SchoolBzz swag packets of, a little bit of honey, some fun socks. And I think he was taken aback a little bit that I actually was like presenting him with a gift when I showed up for the photo, but it was kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I see the picture. I'd say that's a great move by you. So you can slip in the quick little, who knows, maybe he or his a local school or teachers or students he's connected with can get on board with SchoolBzz. So good move by you.
Yeah, I think every entrepreneur, you have to get creative about how you get the word out and really trying to maximize every opportunity to kind of, leave a little something behind. And yeah, so we're always, I pretty much have socks and a bit of honey with me just about everywhere I go.
the essentials, as I call them, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's overall just a great company name and brand position, I'd say. And so, kind of points to, for me, your general, knowledge and skills as an entrepreneur. So I notice as I talk to folks who are involved in EdTech that it often breaks down into a couple of different paths. So some folks began as a teacher or administrator and then made the leap to create some product that related to their work in the classroom or schools. And then there's folks who start off in technology or business and they're in other sectors and they say, I want to bring that to education. You seem to have a few different types of experiences that lead you where you are now. So I'm curious if you could tell me about your journey that leads you to where you are now with Hive Digital and SchoolBzz.
Absolutely. And I would say probably first and foremost, it started on the technology side. Steve Jobs, I think, has a quote about, you can't really connect the dots looking forward. You can only do it looking back. And so I don't know that back when I started in tech, which was the mid-90s, that I had any idea I'd be where I am today. But I went to college out in California, and so started with a small software startup the year before I graduated. My undergraduate degree's in math, so I was definitely looking for something a little bit more analytical. And, California at the time, the software industry was really starting to gain a lot of momentum. So jumped right into kind of the tech side of things. But then, and that was for about 10 years. And then I moved out here to Colorado, actually as part of an acquisition, and didn't have kids at the time. But when my kids were born, I kind of decided to, let's hang up kind of the tech side of my professional career a little bit, focused on family. And it didn't take long for me to get connected with a couple of educators here locally that were really passionate about education and various programs. And that led me down a path for the next, 10, 15 years of, I'm really dating myself here, of looking at charter schools, consulting with school leaders. And I think even through that phase of where I was really focused on education, I was still bringing a lot of the tech and the business into all the projects I was working on, and then I went back for my MBA even after that. So I would say that maybe two themes that kind of run through my entire professional career is that I've always only ever done startups. So the software companies were startups, starting those 2 charter schools. And then communications was always a key thing. So my background has been in marketing and communications, and that was the roles I had through everything. And even as I was consulting with school leaders, a lot of that had to do with student recruitment and community outreach and, communications plans and that type of stuff. So there were some themes pretty consistent, but definitely I would say it probably was tech turned education. And then I'm a parent as well. So I think we really focus in on the parent side of our solution. And I have 4 kids. So when I started this, my kids were, I think, 8th grade, 6th, 2nd, and kindergarten. And now they're a few years older than that. But, there's a lot of personal experience tied into it as well.
Yeah, and there's a few things in there that I'd like to touch on. But since you just ended with that, you said there's some personal experience tied in there as well. What was it like to be working at least somewhat in education while having your kids get their education? How was that an informative process going both ways?
I have a whole new appreciation for schools and teachers and so much more about the education system by being able to see not just schools from a parent's perspective, but also see it from more of an operational side. So that was really fascinating to me. And I sat for many, many years on the board of our charter schools. And, it was really interesting to see, education from a parent's perspective. It's so emotional, and parents are so passionate about their kids and wanting the best for the kids. And I completely get that. But then you look at the other side on the operational side, and, and schools are doing a lot with very little resources to try to deliver the best educational program that they have. So there's this unique balance of how do you not just make both sides happy, but really add value to both. And I think that's probably why I've, ultimately decided to stay committed to, the EdTech space is there's, I think with technology and my love for technology, like trying to find ways that we can use technology to, save costs or streamline processes, make connections a little bit easier. It just seems like there's really got to be a better way to kind of help out in some of those areas so that parents can really be connected and supporting their kids at home, and the teachers and the school leaders as well feel like they have the resources they need to deliver their program that they're focused on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this is, leading into what SchoolBzz can do for schools and well, again, really everyone involved in the school. So can you, just for folks who are not familiar, just really like kind of break down what's the overall approach that SchoolBzz takes, and maybe a little bit about how you got started with that in particular?
Yeah. So like I said, we were, really focused on consulting with school leaders around communications as kind of this opportunity presented itself. And I would say initially it started out as just a personal frustration with having 4 kids and really trying to keep up to date on what was happening and, what assignments I should be helping them with. Because keep in mind at the time I had, a kindergarten and second grader as well. And then I had, kids that were in middle school though, and trying to make sure I was aware of what opportunities existed for them when in clubs and activities and other events that were happening outside of school. And it just got really tough to keep up with it all. This was back in, I'd say our feasibility study that we did was back around 2014, 15. And at the time, our school specifically was sending emails, and all the teachers were also doing classroom websites. But then some of the teachers were recognizing that parents weren't going to the websites. So they started using messaging apps, and then the clubs and the PTO and the, coaches were all using other apps as well. So it was really overwhelming. And, the more that we get out, talk to parents and talk to schools and IT directors that are trying to manage this entire process, it's, I think everybody recognized that there was a challenge here as far as how do we streamline and simplify. So that's where it started. And then we dug in on a feasibility study and really tried to say, what products exist right now to solve this problem, and is there an opportunity for us to create something here? So that's kind of what started. And we've been, I'd say, I think this is our third year of rolling out our SchoolBzz platform to schools to test it, use it. We're constantly doing focus groups with the school leaders to make sure that we're meeting their needs with how we deliver the platform, doing a lot of research with the parents in our system. I mean, we've had thousands of parents use SchoolBzz to give us some really good insights around what they feel is most important as far as the information they access. And, I think a couple of key things that we've learned along the way is parents are really driven by their notifications and their smartphones and their social media apps and whatnot. So making notifications a key part of our parent strategy was something that we recognized early on. And then on the school side, I think one of the things we realized in the last year was there's so many tools that are being used on the school side. And is there a way for us to really tap into some of the existing tools rather than requiring a school to add one more tool to the list? And so our focus this year has really been on partnering with the learning management systems. And we did a partnership with SchoolBzz this spring. We're working with the Google Classroom team now and allowing teachers to then reduce the number of tools that they're using to share information with parents, because SchoolBzz will just tie directly into the learning management system and pull that information out versus, a lot of times today we see teachers using, a learning management system plus their student information system and some of the other apps and whatnot. So we're really just still really committed to trying to simplify and make things easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like you're at a cool stage because you said it's about 3 years or so in, and you did the feasibility study, and now you have plenty of users to get feedback from. So I talked to a lot of education entrepreneurs who are maybe a couple of steps behind where you are for this particular project, where they have a tiny bit of traction, or they have, they tested it at one school where they had a personal connection, and they want to continue to validate their idea and get feedback and, of course, grow and get more users. So what's your advice to folks like that? What have you been learning about the best way to, how you apply that marketing communication knowledge that you have to when it comes to offering a product to schools?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, in this K-12 space. Being out here in Colorado, we're a small state, relatively so to some of the others where there's a lot of maybe ed tech companies. And so I think right out of the gate, I've spent a lot of time traveling around and getting perspectives from other areas. K-12, it's so fragmented. So what makes it really tough is, what might work here in Colorado might not work down in Florida, and so really trying to figure out what, what the setup is like for school districts and what the challenges are and what different software systems they're using. That's something that I'm constantly digging into. But when it comes to really, how do you find schools? And I think in the early stage, when you're looking for pilot schools to build momentum, we from the beginning started blogging about our ideas. I think for us, there was a lot of awareness that we felt like we had to build just around the importance of school communications, the importance of parent engagement, and what did that really mean. And so we've consistently pushed pretty hard and been very intentional about kind of our communication strategy. And then early on, a lot of it is just, it's networking and contacts and referrals, and I think FaceTime too. It's super important when you're small, because it's a lot of relationship building. And you know, a school or a district that is willing to pilot with you, there's going to be a lot of, it's a long relationship. You know, some of the pilot schools that we've been working with, we've worked with for a couple of years, and they're amazing with the amount of feedback they give to us. And so we really try to do a very good job in supporting them and recognizing the input that they're giving. So, you know, early on, I think that's super important, is just, you know, as much FaceTime and networking and getting out there and really trying to build relationships with the schools or the districts that you think are a really good fit for your idea, so you can kind of start to validate what that model is that you're building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as a teacher and a writer myself, I definitely agree with the approach that I see you and SchoolBzz take of just sharing lots of useful, valuable information and also interesting stories. I think a lot of education companies still have a lot of room to do that, and maybe don't always see it as the best approach, but compared to other industries that I see, like, you know, the more general business software space, for example, I think teachers would, and school leaders would, and parents would appreciate from companies more of an approach like I see you and SchoolBzz take, where it's really about, you know, telling good stories online. So I do see that, just from my perspective.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that, you know, what we learned through some of our pilots was the software was really easy to use, but where we saw some of the challenges with implementation, sometimes it was a school that was, maybe they were a Google education apps customer for the first time, like they were transitioning into Google. So they were more stuck on that technology than they were with SchoolBzz, or just kind of some basic communication 101. You know, I think it's interesting that most school, you know, teachers and school staff have, you know, laptops or computers, and for many, many years, they are used to writing kind of this weekly email digest that goes out. And I think there's been a behavior change on the parent side as far as how parents consume information. And they're doing it mostly on their mobile. They're pretty much connected 24/7, and they're used to these shorter updates that are coming out. And so that's another piece that sometimes we'll coach teachers on a little bit, is instead of, you know, one really long email at the end of the week, what if we could break that up into 3 kind of short announcements throughout the week to kind of keep people engaged, so that a parent can get that update in just a couple minutes instead of reading for a very long time. So I think that's where you see a lot of us trying to then, you know, push out some of these best practices and help get the word out, because I think it's a transition when, you know, you've got the person publishing the information in one environment and then the person consuming the information in a different environment, trying to figure out how to match those two up.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's interesting that teachers and school leaders need to be, and this is what you're, at least in part, helping them with, almost students and experts on, you know, consumer behavior as it comes to technology, in order to best communicate with the parents that they're working with. And that makes me think, and this can be something that, if you don't have something ready to share, I can cut this out, but often I hear from entrepreneurs that there is a story or an example of a particular teacher or family or school that really sticks out to them to demonstrate what they're trying to achieve with their product, with their service. So does any particular story or example of the benefits of SchoolBzz come to mind for you?
Yeah, there's 2 examples that jump out at me. One of them I kind of chuckle. One of them's a what not to do, and then the second one is then here's a school using SchoolBzz well and what it looks like. But So what not to do is just kind of funny, and I think people can probably relate to this a little bit, but so many schools are used to pushing out these kind of whole school updates. So not even specifically from the teacher, but think of like the office staff and their big newsletters that they push out. And this school in particular was pushing out pretty much about a 10-page PDF every other week. And this is something we hear from parents. They're just like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read that. I can't find the information that's important to me. But what I love about this school, and I had to do a screen grab off their website, is they then archived all their newsletters so that you could go back and find them, and they had them all listed by date. And I pulled up the website to go look something up one time, and I just had to chuckle because they had the dates of every newsletter they had pushed out for the last several years. So you can imagine how many dates were on just one web page. And instead of putting the last one first, they had put the most recent one last. So you scroll down this giant list of dates to find the most recent archived newsletter. And I was like, okay, here's an opportunity for us to kind of like jump in and start to coach them on, better ways to communicate. But yeah, so that's an extreme by far, but I just kind of chuckle because I'm sure there's schools that can relate a little bit to that. But one of our schools that we have here locally, Parker Performing Arts, they're a charter school out here, and they've been one of our pilots that have been around forever. And they also use Google Classroom extensively across all their grades. And they use SchoolBzz very well. So we use the concept of channels. So they have a channel tied to every Google Classroom that they have at the school. So that means that as a teacher posts information to Google Classroom, it just automatically pushes out to SchoolBzz. They aren't having to post information in Classroom and then also somewhere else. And then they've created additional channels outside of Google Classroom because SchoolBzz allows you to do kind of a hybrid if you want to. So they have a channel for PTO, and they have a channel from the front office, and then they have an extensive performing arts program, and so they have a lot of events, and so they'll do kind of these ad hoc channels to keep parents in the loop as they're getting close to performances and practices and that. So, SchoolBzz has really given them a very flexible platform based on kind of the information they're trying to share with parents to keep them in the loop all the time. And they've almost entirely cut out email and have really just driven parents to SchoolBzz. So it really reduced quite a few tools that they were using before we came on board with them. And then the other thing that they do really well is they have a meet and greet day at the start of the school year where parents are coming through with their students and they're getting their schedules and they're signing up for different events and activities. And they always have a SchoolBzz station. So the parents, as they're walking through, they can download the app, get everything set up. So even before the first day of school starts, they've got their parents set up, signed up for activities, they've got the app, they're subscribed to all the relevant channels, and that school always just starts off really, really well.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream come true for you, because I know not implying that you have this experience, but I know one common frustration of folks offering products or services to schools is a decision maker decides to take on the product or service, and then the implementation doesn't happen, so the problem remains, but it could be solved if everybody used the tool correctly.
Right. And we see that a lot. And even as we, try different sales strategies and target different users and who's really the decision maker versus, kind of that influencer. Yeah, there's absolutely times where we've thought we had something right as far as somebody that was so excited about bringing SchoolBzz in, and then it turned out that they didn't have the connections, or maybe they weren't able to then take it much further than that. So that gives us an opportunity to really look into, okay, well, maybe that parent or teacher, whoever it might be, okay, they could be a really good champion, but we need to look at a different angle as far as how we get the school on board. And I think there's a lot of that. That's part of the learning of building out your sales strategies and whatnot. But it's super important because nobody wants to be one of those software products that's just sitting on the shelf and nobody uses. I mean, we're all, I think, especially in EdTech, there's a lot of passion and kind of social impact, and, everybody's really creating some great solutions. And so I think trying to figure out, all the way through from purchase to implementation and renewal is key to the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it does sound like you have an attitude of looking at the situation as it is and trying to experiment and test to find the best approach, which kind of speaks to your startup experience, in my opinion. I did want to ask you, you mentioned a few times charter schools, which, to be honest, as somebody who's taught in public schools for 9 years, is not something that I know as much about. But I know that you've had a lot of experience and impact in that environment. So, as you know, it's can sometimes be a divisive topic in education. I try to stay as objective as possible about it, but I'm curious to hear about your first, just your experience in charter schools, and then maybe what you think more folks would know about them, or what you think you might say about some of the negative perceptions that folks in public school have of them.
Yeah, and I think, my journey into the whole charter school space is might be unique, but, and that happened years ago, back in, I think, 2004 was the first time I attended a meeting, and then kind of it piqued my interest, and one thing kind of continued to lead to another. But I think one of the biggest challenges we see, and here in Colorado, there's a lot of support for charter schools, and I think state to state it can vary quite a bit. Some states welcome them with open arms, and other states are really unsure and pretty resistant. But I think first and foremost, I think a lot of people, charter schools are public schools. I think there's a lot of people that aren't quite aware of that, and they don't think that charter schools follow the same rules or have the same accountability metrics or that type of stuff, but they absolutely do. And I think that's probably just first and foremost kind of something that I continue to see a lot of the charter organizations pushing out, is that yes, charter schools are public schools. And then from there, really looking at, the value and the programs that the charter school offers. So, really looking at it from the kids or the family's point of view. And I'm a big believer in school choice across the board, and I do believe that parents should have the right to choose a school that best meets the need of their kid. And that might be a charter school, but it could be a neighborhood school or a magnet school or a private school, or I was out in California recently, and wow, I was amazed at the number of homeschool options that existed out there. And so I think, charter school is one unique type of program, but I think there's a lot of options out there around school choice. And, my experience with charter schools, I was connected with a group of teachers. So the charter schools that we started here in Colorado were originally, the idea and the vision behind them was started by a group of really passionate teachers who saw a need for a program that didn't exist in our community at the time. And we were really focused on a pretty intensive foreign language program. And that's what piqued my interest. So it wasn't even that I was upset with the neighborhood school or anything like that. It was really that when I sat down with these teachers and really learned more about what they wanted to do and why, I was kind of fascinated. So I originally just started to, let me help you market, let me help you kind of volunteer. And it started as just pure volunteer role to just help get the word out. And then the more I learned about it, the more I was kind of drawn into it. And, 2 schools later and still working with a lot of schools in the industry, I never knew that's where it would end up, but it's been a really fun journey and a lot of great people.
Yeah, that was well explained, I'd say, to touch on some things that are probably not always part of the discussion. And I think you're right. It's so interesting with America's education system, how things vary state to state. So that's also an important point. Mm-hmm. How about connections or similar lessons or kind of some clear differences maybe that you've seen with your experience working with schools in that capacity on kind of building and developing the school, as opposed to your experience leading a company?
Really similar, actually. I would say starting a school and starting a company, there's so many similarities around just the startup process of being able to really get really concrete about what your business idea or your school program is, to the point that you can communicate it well and really build momentum and awareness about what that is in the community or to your customers. You know, schools are very local in a sense. So a lot of what you're doing is taking that program idea and sharing it with the families in your community to see if they're interested. You know, when we were starting up our charter schools, we would go into the parks and do surveys. We held a lot of local information meetings, not really that different from what we do on the sales side for starting a business, you know, constantly going to meetups and networking events, going to trade shows to meet with prospective customers. So there's a lot of similarities there on both sides. And even on the fundraising, you know, charter schools, a lot of them do apply for grants to help with some of the startup costs. And, you know, I even see EdTech companies today. Some of them are very successful in getting grants to help with their startup operations, or they're doing some type of fundraising strategy. But I think it's very similar on both sides. And the startup, you know, process, startup journey, it can be such a roller coaster ride, I think, regardless of industry. And so knowing that, you know, there's going to be times when you are just celebrating because things are going so well, and then there's going to be other times where, you know, I think we definitely had some challenges, probably more political than anything else, with the start of our charter schools. But there's challenges regardless when you're creating something and figuring out how to push through that, and, you know, reaching out to your network of supporters to kind of help you get through it, to get through the next phase. And so I think there's so many similarities when it comes to the startup side of, you know, even business versus a school. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can remember when I started to become more fascinated with technology and start to follow some EdTech startups, and then eventually read about the lean startup methodology and things along that nature.
Mm-hmm.
I started to notice the same similarities of me planning a lesson, teaching it first period, making changes, teaching it fifth period, changes seventh period, and the same concept of releasing a product and iterating. So yeah, I see those connections in my own life too. So
yeah, and I think that concept of iterating is so important. And I don't know, I think that's something with kids today. I don't know if they get how much opportunity they get to really iterate on an idea. You know, my kids, they have two parents as entrepreneurs, so they at least see us doing it all the time, but also volunteer with Junior Achievement. And I'll go do an entrepreneurship lecture at some of the local high schools here. And I talk about iterating all the time, you know, that just because you don't get it right the first time doesn't mean you failed. Like, learn from it and try it again, and then try it again, you know, and it's really important to kind of stick through that.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily plan to talk to you about this, but I'm fascinated with what you just said, because I see from, again, working with and learning about EdTech startups, how it's brought this whole new perspective to my work in schools. And I see so much more opportunity, like the same thing as what you've said. Kids right now have access to building and using all of these different platforms. You know, so many things are free to use, and you can use it to build something meaningful. And I think there's just tons of room still in school to develop those opportunities. So what do you tell students when you do a lecture like that? And I'm curious what you think are the opportunities for entrepreneurship in school.
I think kids learning about entrepreneurship in school is super important. I think how it's delivered is probably tough, because I don't know how many teachers have a background in entrepreneurship to be able to really share what some of those basic principles are. You know, if you pull out that concept that we just talked about in regards to iterating and having projects that kids can work on, where they are, perhaps there's milestones along the project of, you know, let's do this and let's present and let's get feedback and then let's do it again. I think you see a lot of that. But I think probably the biggest opportunity is when you can really tap into the community and And I do this when I'm talking with, other business leaders and folks in the community as well. I'm like, what are you doing to give back to your school? Like the local business leaders, whether you're with a nonprofit or a business or whatever it may be, but the more that they can partner or volunteer or go in and guest lecture at some of their local schools, that really is what gives kids insights into kind of what happens outside and beyond, high school or college or whatever path they might choose. But I think that's a key piece where schools might be able to offer a little bit more on the entrepreneurship side, if they can kind of tap into some of those local resources, because I don't know that a school is always going to have that type of individual locally within their program. And so that's one of the reasons that I love talking on that topic anyways, but that's one of the reasons that I go into some of the local high schools, is because it's all I've ever done. And, my whole life has been about iterating and trying and just trying and retrying. And so I love to share that with kids.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that to me speaks to a lot of the mission or the values that I see in SchoolBzz about keeping all stakeholders involved and informed. So I see a lot of kind of cohesiveness there between your life and your company. So
exactly.
I'm curious, what are you looking forward to? What's next for you and SchoolBzz?
Oh, let's see. Am I looking out 2 years, 5 years? No, just kidding. So right now I'd say we've spent quite a few years really digging into product strategy to make sure that we understood the challenges from all the users in a sense. I think that's what's a challenge with the K-12 space is you're not just selling to one person. There's district folks, there's school leaders, there's teachers, there's parents, there's students. And so I think we've spent a lot of time on the product side kind of mapping out of what that should look like. So, and then my background's more on the sales and marketing and partnerships. And so what I'm super excited about right now is just being able to be confident in the product strategy that we have mapped out, and now really focusing in on our sales and marketing strategies and, being able to get out and talk with district leaders about what we're doing, really focus on sales, really focus on marketing, and really starting to scale up the number of customers that we have using SchoolBzz. So I really love that space. And, even as much as we talk about kind of iterating on the product side, you really iterate in this next phase with sales and marketing as well, as you're trying to figure out the right strategies and campaigns that work and don't work. So it continues through the entire process. And yeah, so very excited for these next couple of years to really kind of look into, really focus in on that side of it.
Yeah, well, it seems like from our conversation today, you have the skills and experience you've built to make that happen. So I've found our conversation fascinating, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, Jennifer.
Great questions. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. For everyone listening, SchoolBzz is at SchoolBzz.com, and that's SchoolBzz.com. And Jennifer, what else would you like to suggest or request from listeners, whether they're teachers, school leaders, other entrepreneurs, maybe how they can get in touch, or something you'd like to suggest they do or check out, whatever you'd like?
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch with us, like you said, our SchoolBzz.com website has all of our contact information. My personal Twitter account is StartupJen, just Jen. And I have a lot of fun with that. That's going to take you beyond just kind of our product pitch, but I'm always pushing out. I'm just fascinated by kind of future of work and startup journeys and school communications and what's happening there. And that's kind of, if anybody's interested in just kind of the topic on a broader level, that's kind of a place that you can follow me or reach out to me directly. But yeah, I would say anybody, kind of listening to this, even if you just from this podcast kind of think about the information that you have that parents might want, the kids that you have, and the type of support that they have outside of the classroom. And I think even just starting to think about how we can do a better job at connecting with everybody that kind of is basically what I call kind of like a students network, and getting everybody on the same page. I think that will lead to making huge strides for the student as well. So just having these conversations and helping to get the word out, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, certainly a valuable and essential part of education is making sure communication is happening. So again, Jennifer, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Everybody go check out SchoolBzz.com. My name is Gerard Dawson, and thank you for listening to the EdTech Startup Show.
Thank you.
All right.